chapter 12, beginning in verse 10. Beginning in verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I got a great idea. Sorry, it doesn't say that. He said, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. Now, at first, it sounds like a really great husband, I got to tell you right now, okay? You know, like, man, you're beautiful. You're just, honey, you are gorgeous. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they'll kill me, but they'll let you live. Okay? Verse 13. Say you're my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. That's quite the spin. Did we mention last week that Abram is a flawed man with simple faith in God, and that he's also in a very flawed world? And he has this plan, which we're going to talk about more in a minute, of, you know what? You're so beautiful, they're going to take you and kill me so they can have you. But if we lie and say that you're just my sister and that we're not married, then at least I'll still be alive. I'm not sure what's going to happen to you, but at least I'll still be alive. You know, it kind of seems like this is my plan here. Man, what a charmer. Verse 14. Oh boy. That when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. Man, you gotta see this new woman in town. She's a knockout. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. And so, man, Pharaoh's like, man, she is a knockout. That's your sister? Bro, I'll hook you up, man. I'll give you all kinds of animals. I'll give you servants. I'll make you more wealthy than you already are. And Abram goes, oh, yeah, go ahead and take her. Sounds good. Yep. Perfect. This is working out even better than I thought. Not only are they not killing me, they're giving me stuff. Oh, my word. Verse 17. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Now, this story doesn't tell us everything. This happens again, by the way, I'm sad to say, with a different guy by the name of Abimelech. And in that story, the Lord directly tells him, hey, this lady's married to this guy. Like, we don't know how he specifically knows, but he finds out one way or another. He either deduces it like, let's see, nothing was going wrong, then this wait a second. Well, either he figured it out, or the Lord told him, or whatever, but he knows. How will they know? He knows. Okay, 19. Why did you say she is my sister? So that I took her for my wife. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Get out of here. He's done with them. Verse 20, and Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. And then one more verse, beginning of verse 13. So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him into the Negeb. Okay. And that's all the verses we're going to look at today. This is a fun story, I got to tell you, right here. Now, I'll start and be honest and say some people, and I'll give you my thoughts here in a minute. Some people think that there wasn't anything necessarily intrinsically wrong with Abram going down to Egypt in the first place. It's just self-preservation. There's a famine. I got to go somewhere where there's food. But I might push back on that a little bit, and I'll show you why here in a minute. God's plan for Abram that we looked at last week. Leave your land, and I will give you a different land, and I will bless you and protect you. Later, that land is confirmed to be Canaan. Yep, this is the land I was talking about. You're there. He builds an altar. He travels somewhere else. He builds another altar. I'm going to bless you here. I'm going to protect you here. Then a famine comes. Abram's plan. There's a famine. Let's go to Egypt and look for a blessing. It's questionable, and I'll show you why again in a minute. And then they might kill me for my wife. Let's lie about it and dishonor my wife to secure my protection. So once again, Abraham, simple faith, followed God's plan into the unknown. But the point is this: Abram had his own backup plans. He has his own self-preservation backup plan. But if it doesn't work out, and he's got this kind of tucked in his back pocket. Lying about his wife, dishonoring his wife, was always his plan. You ready for this? I'm going to show you something just in case you didn't know. I never noticed this before. And I'm sure you guys are much smarter than I am, and you've noticed this before me. When they're going down to Egypt, this isn't the first time you thought of this. It's not like, hey, honey, as they're on their way down, hey, honey, I have this idea. This came up with. I'm not the only one who notices you're attractive. No, this wasn't like on their way to Egypt when this happened. Genesis 20:13 says, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother. My guy. When they left Mesopotamia, he said, hey, sweetheart, out of the kindness of your heart, wherever we go, don't tell anyone that we're married. This wasn't just the plan in Egypt. This was just the game plan the whole time. Don't tell people that you're my wife. This is why. This is always in his back pocket. He's got this one ready to go. If they're about to kill him, just my sister. Just my sister. You can have her. Got any camels or something? You can have her. Good night. He had this one in his pocket the whole time. When they left. So even though he's a man of simple faith, God says go. He goes, although we did talk about last week how he kind of delayed his going. They traveled so far and then stopped and then they went again. Right? He finally leaves. And when they're ready to leave, all right, if anyone tries to harm me, this would be one of the key reasons why. So look, I got this backup plan. God didn't tell me anything about this. God didn't say, now if I'm not able to protect you, then sacrifice your wife. This was not the game plan. God said, I'll protect you. If anybody curses you, I'm going to curse them. If they honor you, I'll honor them. He doesn't believe that. Now, here's what I got to say, because this story is wild. Let's be honest. And any one of us might say, I would never dishonor my spouse like this. Like Abram dishonored Sarai. I would never do such a thing. And honestly, you probably wouldn't, okay? You probably wouldn't do this. But there is other ways that some people might do this in principle, and I'll share what I mean. I would never ask my spouse to lie about being married to me, but would you ask your spouse to lie for you? In principle, the same thing's going on here. And you're dishonoring your spouse to do such a thing. You're asking them to lie for you. It's putting your spouse in a ridiculously uncomfortable position. I would never let someone have their way with my spouse to protect my own skin. Okay, I would hope not, but would you ignore or neglect your spouse's needs while prioritizing your own needs? That's what's going on here. Abram's prioritizing what he needs in his mind. I need to be protected, so I'm going to do this to you. So you might not do what Abram did, but in principle, someone could still do that. I'm going to put myself, for my sake, for me, honey, I'm going to put you down. For me. So it's easy to dump on Abram's actions, and I think we should. Because his actions are horrendous, they're really bad. However, many a husband and wife have dishonored their spouse with the same base principle, the way thinking that Abram was thinking here. The action could be different, but the principle behind it would be the same. Asking your spouse to lie for you, prioritizing your needs over your spouse's needs. This is what Abram is doing. So once again, we've talked about this before. When you're looking at stories or characters in the Bible, it's easy to say, well, I would never do that, or that doesn't reflect me. But in principle, there is still something there that can reflect our sinful hearts. You live in a different world, different place. I don't know what you would have done if you were in Abram's situation, but in principle, people can still do the same thing. So don't be like Abram with your spouse. Don't put them in a position where you're asking them to lie for you. Don't put them in a position where you prioritize your needs over their needs. This is not the Christian view of marriage. Abram is the epitome of not what the Bible says in regards to how a husband should treat his wife. It's, hey, be willing to die for your bride the way that Christ died for the church. Here's Abram. She can die for me. It's fine. Like, she can become part of Pharaoh's harem. Doesn't bother me a bit. Like, just whoop. It's polar opposite of what the New Testament describes and how a husband and wife should love each other. And so, anyway, something to consider in this story, because it's too easy just to kind of like, oh, wow, wild story. Like, the principle is still the same. People still do this. It just looks different. Excuse me. But what about going down to Egypt? Let's talk about this for a minute. What about going down to Egypt? Was it just self-preservation? And it's fine. There's different opinions on whether or not it was right for him to go down to Egypt. Was it wrong? Was it born out of necessity? There's a famine. He had to find some food somewhere. Is it simply just preservation? And here's what I want us to do. Maybe it wasn't wrong for him to go down to Egypt, but I'm going to argue that it's questionable. So consider these things. God said, "Go and I will bless you." And Abraham went, and when there was serious trouble, he left. And there's no indication in the text of him seeking God, hey, God, am I supposed, or of God telling him, hey, go down to Egypt for protection. There is no sign of that in the text. Consider this. In Genesis 26, Isaac, the son of Abraham as an adult, faced a famine. And here's what God told him. Don't go down to Egypt. I will bless you in this land. Now, you might say, well, he said that to his son, not to him. Well, it's like the negative of the positive. It's like, he said, go there, I'll bless you. And then he left. So then to the son, he's like, hey, I want to bless you here. It's almost like, in light of what your dad did, like, just so you know, don't go down there. There's this. Or in Genesis 46, Jacob, Abraham's grandson, as an old man facing famine, he does eventually go down to live in Egypt, but only after God gives him special permission to do so. He actually says, hey, don't be afraid to go down there. This time you need to go. Why does he wait for permission? So the grandson knows this, the son knows this, like, don't go down to Egypt without permission. Consider this. In Isaiah 30 and in 31, God threatens the kingdom of Judah with judgment for seeking help from Egypt without consulting him first. It wasn't that it was intrinsically wrong to get help from Egypt. He said, you went to get help from Egypt and you didn't ask me. You didn't ask me for help first. You didn't seek my counsel first. That's what it says in those first verses of Isaiah 30 and Isaiah 31. And consider this also. He goes down to Egypt knowing that he's going to lie about and dishonor his wife. All the way to the point of having no problem with her being married to somebody else as long as he doesn't die. He went down to Egypt knowing he was going to be dishonorable and cowardice in regards to his wife. So it's kind of hard to separate him going down to Egypt from the intentions of what he was going to do when he got there. It's hard to separate those two because there's kind of this one action. I'm going to go down there. I'm going to lie about my wife. It's going to be awesome. Like this is his plan. So it's kind of hard to separate that. So all that being said, of things to consider. It's not that it's intrinsically wrong necessarily for Abram to go down to Egypt. Jacob got permission to go down to Egypt. Joseph and Mary, right, in the gospel story, in the Christmas story, they go down to Egypt, right? Because God told them to. He says, go down there, I'm going to protect you down in Egypt. But the point is that this probably wasn't what God wanted Abram to do. And doing what God doesn't want you to do, well, is intrinsically wrong. The going down to Egypt, that part isn't the intrinsically wrong part. But if that's not what God wanted him to do, that's intrinsically wrong. Doing what's right in our own eyes, that is wrong. I mean, who knows? Maybe God was going to show Abram how he could bless him even during a famine. Which he does with Jacob. Maybe God was going to show how he could protect Abram's beautiful wife without dishonoring her. Maybe it was going to grow Abram's faith into a more mature faith by staying in the land that God told him to go to. But we won't know now. We don't know because that's not what he did. Abram went down to Egypt. So, little application at this point. Depending on the circumstances, going down to Egypt can represent not trusting what God has told you. Man, I meant to look this up. There's actually an old album by Keith Green with the theme of Egypt. Is like the whole theme of the album. And I think one of the first songs, they're like, so, you want to go down to Egypt? I meant to pull up that song. It's like from the 70s, guys. Okay, but you can look it up. Keith Green, Egypt, you'll find it. Okay. But depending on the circumstances, it could represent not trusting what God has told you. First sign of trouble, I'm going to go over here. Egypt can represent the plans you have in your back pocket, just in case. Egypt can represent wealth and protection, but at the expense of not relying on God. Egypt can represent seeking our own plan without first seeking God. So the point is this: don't live out the Christian life or your Christian calling with a plan B in your pocket. We've got to be careful here. We can't. Last week we talked about being called away into Christ, but we can't then follow him as long as it's easy. I'll follow into his calling and what he has me to do as long as it's easy. I'll follow as long as things go according to my timeline. I'll follow as long as it's as like I like how it's going. I'll follow as long as I understand what God is up to. And if not, then I'll do this instead. Don't live out your Christian life with a plan B. Don't follow God's calling with the fallback plan. It's like the opening scripture we have. Where else would we go, Lord? To who else would we go? It's a fool's errand to live out your Christian life with if this doesn't pan out, I could always. If God isn't doing it the way that I like, I could always. Don't live with a plan B. Okay. Another point. Some people, I've discovered, I've never even realized this. Some people kind of grumble about God punishing the Egyptians as being unfair because the Pharaoh didn't know that Sarah was married. At a face level, that almost seems like an honest question. Like, wait a second, they got punished, but they didn't know she was married. Well, on one hand, which we'll talk about later in a moment, this was God protecting Sarai and Abram in order to preserve his promise. This is something has to be kept in mind here, but we'll talk about that in a minute. We know that there's a promise with Abram and Sarai. We'll talk about that in a minute. Just put that over here for a minute. Even without that, the point here is that ignorance is not bliss. Ever heard anyone say that? Ignorance is bliss. No, it's not. Ignorance is ignorance. It's not blissful. If a single man has an affair with a married woman, what is that? Good night. I've said so many weird words today. If a single man has an affair with a married woman, but she had told him that she was single, does that automatically negate the drama of the situation? Well, he didn't know. You know, more than likely, her husband's not going to respond with, oh, you didn't know. It's all good. I'm not even mad. You didn't know. Really? Come on, guys. No! He's going to be upset. He's going to want to punch the guy in the face. I'm not saying he should. I'm saying he's going to want to. So no one can say I was doing a call to violence. Another example might be this. Someone could be pulled over for speeding, and they could be completely honest in saying, I'm sorry, officer, I didn't see the speed limit sign. But regardless of their ignorance, they're going to get a ticket because even though they didn't see a sign, it was still against the law to drive 15 miles over the city speed limit. It was still dangerous. It was still potentially going to hurt somebody driving through town like that. I didn't see the sign, but it was there. So ignorance is not bliss. Our actions have consequences even if they were done in ignorance. I've had to learn two sides of a thing, which is this. When someone has done something wrong, and I can try to learn their perspective or like where they're coming from, like, well, you know what? That they were taught that that's how you do that, and it wasn't intentional. They didn't do this out of a bad heart. It was good intentioned. But all because it came from good intentions or from misinformation, it was still bad. And someone still had to suffer from that and face the consequences. So even if it came from a good intentioned place, there's still results. There's still consequences to those actions. It doesn't make them just disappear all because, well, the person didn't know. Ignorance is not bliss. People can act in sincerity and be wrong and have to face the consequences. For us, we could be ignorant of something being sinful. Like, honestly, I didn't know that was wrong. I didn't know I shouldn't do that. I didn't know that I should be doing this, whatever. But that doesn't negate you from facing the consequences of your sin. You know, let me give a church example, which I think is painful to bring up. But it's like, for instance, there was a very large church that was there was all kinds of mess in the leadership and all kinds of drama, and the lead pastor was being like very incredibly wrong in his leadership and abusive towards people and how he talked to people, and anyway, all kinds of things. And anytime someone in the church would finally, hey, we got to have a meeting, and me like, hey, he can't talk to people like this. He can't treat people like this. He's being very abusive and all that. And the other pastors or leaders in the church would be like, well, you know, we don't like it either, but people are getting saved. Okay. All right. Anytime I hear that, I'm a very patient person. When someone tries to justify a church's bad actions or leaders' bad actions or bad teaching from people, but people got saved, like, yeah, because the gospel works. People don't save people. Jesus saves people through the gospel. So if a bad leader or a bad person preaches the gospel, people can still get saved because the gospel works. But it doesn't then justify all the bad things that they did or do. And this just applies to everything. You can't just go around justifying people's actions all the time. Well, some good came from it. I got off my notes. You see, you might have noticed that things kind of seem to end up all right for Abram at the end of this story. He gets out of Egypt. They avoided some of the famine. So there's one. They avoid some of the famine issue. They leave with a whole lot more stuff and a lot more animals and everything. And in fact, the very next verse, I think verse 2 says that they're very rich. They were wealthy, now they're very wealthy. So his wife makes it out, and he's more wealthy. And no one killed them. And it looks like it all worked out. Let's not mistake God's grace in getting them out of Egypt, wealthier and with Sarai, as justifying their escapades in Egypt. I really hope that's not someone's takeaway with this story. Well, it worked out, so it must not have been that bad. Well, we'll save this for later. I actually think there's some unseen and future consequences. There's some that are unseen, some that are seen, future consequences for these actions, which we'll probably talk about. But in the story, you don't necessarily see it immediately. But I hope that's not what we get. I hope that's not what we get out of the story. The end does not always justify the means. In fact, most of the time, it doesn't. What's going on here? See, in this moment, God is being faithful to the promise that he's made despite sinful and reckless behavior of Abram. God is helping Abram because we are all in need of the promise that's been given. The promise of blessing all the nations of the earth is dependent upon Sarai not being in Pharaoh's harem or being Pharaoh's wife, still childless, in particular without a child from Abram. This is a big problem. God has chosen to accomplish salvation for humanity, beginning with the promise to Abram that in him all nations will be blessed. And God will explicitly make it clear later that he always meant that Abram would have a child of his own, a child of the promise, and that this child would be conceived and born by his wife. Humanly speaking, Abram has jeopardized the salvation of the entire human race. God's plan of redemption. I was just trying to escape a famine. You were trying to condemn us all, you imbecile. I don't think he knows that. Because he doesn't even know that it's meant to be a child with Sarai. He doesn't know all these details yet. But God knew these details, and he had, trust me, I have a plan. And he goes down, good night, bro. So when he gives up his wife to Pharaoh's house, he didn't know if he'd ever see her again. Do you understand this? He gave up his wife, didn't know if he'd ever see her again. The story of the Bible could just end right here. That was a good 12 chapters, like the Bible will be a really short book. Why? Because God made a promise, and then when the promise failed, there'd be nothing else to say. God would be no different than the gods that he had called Abram to leave. God's unable to fulfill their promises. There'd be nothing unique about this God. The story would be over. But glory to God. No mere human can thwart the divine plan of God. Our salvation was not dependent upon the faithfulness of Abram. Our salvation is dependent upon the faithfulness of God. And this is the biggest takeaway in the story. What God says is. What God promises remains. What God decrees happens. Isaiah 55:11, God says, my word that goes out from my mouth, it shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it. So when God promised Abram, in you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed, that is what was going to happen. And Abram going down to Egypt couldn't stop it. Abram winning the trophy for worst husband of the year wasn't going to stop it. Because this was about God's faithfulness to his promise. Mankind cannot thwart what God has spoken. You can push against it all day long, but God will still get his way. Have you ever seen when a hurricane comes in and they send some poor reporter out there with a camera to stand in front of the incoming winds? Like, it's really windy out here, you can't even believe it. Like, you don't need to do this. Like, whoever keeps doing that, like, stop. We know it's windy, okay? We don't need to see someone blowing around, and then sometimes the camera is doing this, They can't win against the wind. You can't win against the wind. So just like a human being can't hold back the winds of a hurricane, Abram can't hold back the promise of God, even in his complete stupidity. And that's good news this morning. Last week it was really good news that God was willing to call Abram who worshiped false gods. And the reality is, all of us have false gods in our life that he's called us out of. And if he was waiting for us to get our act together, he never would have called any one of us in this room. And that's good news. But it's also good news that when we fail and we stumble and we think, man, this seems like a good plan B, God isn't like, well, there goes my promise. I tried. You can't stop God's faithfulness. As I said, I'll say it again. You can no more stop the plans of God than you could hold back a hurricane with your hands. It's just not possible. God said he'd bless all nations through Abraham, and he has. And he does. And that blessing has a name. A name above all other names. A name at which every knee must bow and confess as Lord. A name that brings salvation and forgiveness to whoever will call upon him in faith. A name that will be praised forever and ever. What is this blessing that blesses all nations? And what is his name? Jesus. Amen. His name is Jesus. And all the way back in Genesis 12, God is promising all nations will be blessed in Jesus. And you're not going to stop me. And if that's true in Genesis 12, it's true today. No one can thwart what he's up to in the world. I will ask you this. When it comes to God's plans, which side of that do you want to be on? Do you want to push against the hurricane wind? Or do you want to go in the same direction with it? God's going to get his way, but you can either live in opposition to that in complete misery, like the reporter being called there. It's already going this way anyway. Let's go with the Lord on this.